Welcome to another edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 64. You're watching two men sitting down before Super Bowl Sunday talking about all things Anglican. It's also a Scouting Sunday, Anglican Scouting Sunday. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm George Conger. And today's February 3rd, 2013.
Okay, George, let's move on to story one. Let's ask the audience to bear with us. We're going to talk slow because a lot of stuff has happened in the last 14 days and we didn't get a chance last week to tape a show. A little background with Charleston. The Diocese of South Carolina left the Episcopal Church back in November 2012. They did that by changing their bylaws and constitution, no longer recognizing 815 or General Convention. And there's now a fight for what to do in South Carolina now that the Episcopal Church has no longer a representative province or diocese down there. The strategy in the past, this is just a quick background, is to fight for the identity of who really represents the diocese. Is it 815 and the presiding bishop, Catherine Jaffe-Shorey, or is it the bishop, whether it be John Schofield or Bishop Eicher? Who is the real bishop and who gets to represent what the diocese is and who they are? We have reached that point. Catherine Jaffe-Shorey was going to fly down there last week, the same time your Anglicanism was having their meeting, but there was a little procedure put in by the real diocese, filing a restraining order. And a restraining order, in my mind, is meant for abusive spouses, wife beaters, stalkers, the list goes on. It now can apply to clergy and presiding bishops. George, how does a presiding bishop react when she has a restraining order filed against her, George?
She responded with abuse. Presiding Bishop Catherine Jaffe-Shorey hurt herself very badly because she damaged her moral credibility. Now, lawsuits come, lawsuits go. There have been 80 plus Episcopal Church lawsuits, and there'll probably be another 80 by the time I'm finished writing in my career. And you win a few, you lose a few. But the battle in South Carolina has now moved to a different pitch, where the presiding bishop, instead of saying, Mark Lawrence, you did something wrong, you withdrew and you're stealing church property. Okay, in other words, instead of describing his actions as bad, the presiding bishop has moved to a different plane of saying that Mark Lawrence is not only a thief, he's a murderer, he's a terrorist. In other words, she has personalized this, and her opponents are no longer acting improperly. Her opponents are evil. And when you do that, when you go so over the top, so far beyond what a Christian leader should be doing, you've basically harmed your credibility. And that's what's happened in South Carolina. The lawsuits are important, they're vital to those who are participating, but in the big picture, we've now seen the presiding bishop move from being someone who can claim a degree of moral authority to one whose moral authority is very, very severely damaged by her own action.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, you and I have no credibility, so we can really divulge down to ad Hitlerium pretty quick. But for a person in her position and a person in Mark Lawrence's position, it's really important to stay above the moral threshold. And when an argument reduces itself to calling each other Hitler, that's just name calling. That's no longer discussing the topic or the merits of a case. And we reached out to 815, and 815 said what, George?
815 responded to our query saying, well, the presiding Bishop Catherine Jaffe-Shorey said what she said, but she didn't name any one person or group in particular. So perhaps she was talking about Bashir al-Assad. You know, the Syrians are setting up churches in South Carolina.
Obviously, yes.
You know, maybe that's who she was speaking of. But again, Kevin, I want to get back to this point. You can call someone, you have lied, is different from you are a liar. Mm-hmm. And we've moved from accusations of bad conduct to accusations of accusing people, denigrating them as being moral failures. What you call ad Hitlerium. The Hitler argument. The first person who throws in the Nazis into an argument is usually losing the argument, and this is where the presiding bishop is. maybe she had bad legal advice. Maybe she had great legal advice and refused to take it. But she went down into South Carolina when she probably should have postponed this special convention, allow the lawyers to sort of settle things, and she went down and she so polarized things. Mark Lawrence and his supporters are the anti-gay people. They're wolves who are leading the sheep astray. It just looks bad.
It does, and that's where I think this whole case was lost when she got up on the pulpit and started preaching, because she made this an international story. When it's fought out in the battles in courts between prosecutors and judges and legal teams and stuff like that, the global Anglican communion doesn't care. They don't know anything about it. They couldn't tell you how many active lawsuits are going on in the Episcopal Church. They couldn't tell you who's won or who's lost. They couldn't tell you what diocese is being under threat or in court. They just don't know that. But when somebody, a leader, a presiding bishop, stands up and starts name-calling, they pay attention. You just compared him to a terrorist. You compared him to a mass murderer in Connecticut. And that doesn't really, a whole bunch of water in the Anglican communion, and they start to pay attention. GAFCON is paying attention, and they're active in helping Mark Lawrence. The Archbishop-elect, Justin Welby, is paying attention and is constant communication with the real Diocese of South Carolina and Mark Lawrence, because they want to come out with a reasonable settlement of what to do. And right now, the diocese is without a province, but this isn't the first time a diocese has been without a province, and currently it's not the only diocese without a province. It's not uncertain to say this is not the first time, I got this sentence written down, it's really cool, that there's just been extra provincial provinces without precedent, George.
Yeah, we can go through the entire history of the Anglican Communion, and we can look at extra-provincial provinces. We have them right now. We have the Diocese of Bermuda, one of South Carolina's close neighbors, for instance. So the way they're going forward, it's not without precedent, and there are ways to make this work within the Anglican system. But I am just very fearful of the way things are progressing right now, because we're moving out of honest disagreement into an ideological warfare where there are no prisoners. And when we've reached that, this Catherine Jefferts Schori is no gentleman. That's the meanest thing I could possibly say. I'm sorry.
You've done it. You've gone down ad Hitlerium.
I've gone down that road, but she's not acting like a gentleman. And
she's got gonads.
Not like
but you're right.
Okay.
The funny thing here is, you've lost before you went to court. When you lose in public opinion, it's time to step back. And so many times, people who've been on the right side have had to give up a court case because they've lost public opinion. And I think this is the time that 815 needs to settle down, step back, and start further. Your supporters have denigrated the judge. Your supporters have denigrated Mark Lawrence. If all you've done is name calling, you've revealed the truth about this argument. So much so that Tommy Tisdale went into court the other day and didn't fight the restraining order. It's now an injunction, and once and for all, your legal team isn't even willing to fight for you.
Well, the legal team, they made a decision that this was the best move for them at this time. And they've got a lot of money to spend. It's not like they're short of resources. It's not like they're short of arguments, but they can't fight a losing battle, and they've lost this issue. And instead of losing the whole thing by picking, this is the line in the sand we're going to fight, they've decided to move things on and try to fight the bigger battle. But again, Kevin, you mentioned the surrogates of the presiding bishop, the Episcopal Forum of South Carolina, have published articles basically denigrating the judge's character. One of the attorneys for the diocese used to work for as a law clerk. Wink, wink. We know what that means, that there's undue influence being used. Now, when you start slamming the integrity of the judge at the beginning of a case, in addition to calling Mark Lawrence a murderer and a terrorist, you've got to wonder where is this anger coming from? Yes, there can be anger and disappointment, and it's a terrible thing to lose your church, but there's more to it than that. there's something's going on here, that this has just been so poisoned that it's almost demonic. I'm not saying they are demonic.
Well,
I'm saying there's a demonic sense in all this, of the degree of anger and hatred and hurt that is being exhibited.
And you're a clergyman. It's easy for you to see these things. The ironic thing is now judges are seeing how demonic this really is.
Planting Anglican churches. So what does it mean to plant? What are the strategies for it? What is Anglican? And third, what is the church? So, you know, I went back to the articles of the church. One of the major articles of the 39 articles says that the church is the visible gathering of men, implied women, to where the word of God is purely preached and the sacraments are duly administered. It has nothing about, you know, 1,000 people. It has a building. It's self-sustained. It's all that. So I think that we think too low of what God's given us to do instead of thinking big.
What a week to have a person like Ellen Haley on the show. Let's show a clip quickly from episode 57 of Anglican Unscripted.
But that's going to be different in South Carolina, because I think that'll be one of the first battlegrounds. In fact, it's not entirely impossible that Bishop Lawrence and his legal team will decide to do a preemptive strike and perhaps go after the identity theft while it's happening before they get organized to file a lawsuit.
Yeah, I mean, strategically, if you don't fight for your name, you can't keep your name. So, were we right?
We were right. We were dead right. The preemptive strike did occur. Bishop Lawrence and his diocese filed a lawsuit in South Carolina Circuit Court against the Episcopal Church and went in just before the group was gathering for its organizing convention and obtained a temporary restraining order under South Carolina law that prevented this new group from assuming the title or name and identities of Bishop Lawrence's diocese. And that was a great stroke, because it threw all their planning off. They had to reprint all their documents, change their poster outside, and it was...
No image available. Now, you know, legal strategy, you know, fought early and fought hard can win a case.
Correct.
You're not going to win a case by last-minute legal strategy.
No.
Basically, if you plan ahead and get your I's dotted and your T's crossed, an effective strategy like they've used in San Joaquin and Fort Worth, where the fight in Quincy, where the fight is over the identity of who can represent the Episcopal Diocese in these matters, is where this is going to be won or lost. And,
correct.
But another strategy they have is what we call delay tactics. The legal strategy of 815 is to wait the court and spend the
opponent out of the money.
Yeah, and so in this, they have no victories yet in the diocese.
Right. And it's, as I say, it's a good strategy from another point of view, too, because if you're first into the court, you're the first one to tell the judge the story. Mm-hmm. And that counts for a lot. Many times the judge will, you know, pick up that first impression, and it'd be hard to shake him from it later.
Well, we have something on, the Diocese of South Carolina has something on that side. They had to deal with carpetbaggers, and they have a whole history of people outside the state coming in and causing trouble.
They do.
And so having somebody like the presiding bishop from Yankeeville, New York City, come and claim to be the diocese was going to be troublesome to start with.
And you can see how it really upset her, too. I hope you're doing a segment on that uproarious sermon she gave at the Eucharist following their convention.
Yeah, George and I talked about that. But we need to really talk about, a lot of people are like, it's over. It looks like the diocese, the real diocese is the one. The artificial wannabes have lost in court. And that's not really true. There's not a big conspiracy here. We just won a battle.
There's still a lawsuit pending. It's just the initial battle's been won, right?
Mm-hmm. And in that, all they've won was, so far, in this injunction, is the right to claim themselves the Episcopal Diocese of South Carolina and to be represented by that seal. the property is still in limbo, and on down the line, somebody's going to want to fight over it.
Let's not quite get ahead of ourselves.
Okay.
Bishop Lawrence just came in with a very modest goal in mind to claim the right and title to his trademarks and his seal. And he now has achieved 90% of that goal with the preliminary injunction entered just this past Friday, but or Thursday, I guess it was. In any event, so he's practically almost accomplished everything he wanted to do with the lawsuit. We haven't heard yet from the other side. They have not filed an answer to the complaint, and if they play true to their usual strategy, they will come back with a huge counterclaim asking for all of Bishop Lawrence's bank accounts and property. And that will now inject into the lawsuit a whole new range of issues over property that are not there right now. And it's so it is just going to have to play itself out. We'll see what they do as far as whether they could keep the same strategy they followed in San Joaquin, Pittsburgh, Fort Worth, and San Joaquin in Quincy.
Now, a lot of people are saying we have these victories up front. We're not going to have to spend 8 years in court like other places, and that's not true either.
No, because as I say, we just haven't heard that they haven't fired their return shot yet.
No, we haven't heard from them at all.
Right.
Now, let's talk about what Tech has done so far. Is it a good strategy to have had the meeting anyway under a temporary name?
Well, of course, they had committed themselves, and everyone was gathering. The presiding bishop had flown down from New York. So they pretty much had to go through with what they had to do, and they made the best of the worst situation. They came up with a name, the Episcopal Church in South Carolina, but the name is problematic for the people in the Episcopal Church because every other unit of the Episcopal Church, no matter where it is called the diocese. There's the Convocation of Anglicans in Europe, but that's treated as a diocese too. And so the Constitution and canons of the Episcopal Church are full of the word diocese. Everything applies to diocese. It doesn't apply to some outfit called the Episcopal Church in X state. And so they're going to have a problem incorporating this diocese, this remnant group, into the structure of the Episcopal Church with that name. At some point, I think they're going to have to change it and somehow include the word diocese. They just won't be able to use it in connection with the words South Carolina.
Well, the diocese next to the city with the big funny bridge. There's lots of great names out there.
There's a perfect name would be the newest diocese in South Carolina. Except they'll never buy that.
No, too close. In fact, you and I remember the days back when there was a suit for a different name. Bishop Wantlin and John David Schofield watched the Episcopal Church disintegrate and lose their canons. And the Episcopal Church at one time used to be called the Protestant Episcopal Church in the USA.
Correct.
And they dropped Protestant. They were no longer protesters.
1966, right.
And so Bishop Wantlin and a few other bishops got together and said, well, we're going to take that name and form it in New Jersey, and that didn't go so well for them.
Well, no, because all of a sudden they were suspected of being, fifth column trying to pervert and change the direction of the church. Well, they were trying to keep the church on track and have a safe harbor for it to go forward with the people who wanted to keep traditional values, and they would keep the traditional name. But that got them into trouble with the House of Bishops, and the rest from there. They had to drop the incorporation.
Okay, let's do a little bit off the record, on the record.
Okay.
Okay, a judge doesn't turn off the news when she goes home.
No.
What she does is she sees, how people are acting, and is she allowed to bring that prejudice into the courtroom, or it's just there anyway?
Well, it's there anyway. We don't know, for example, what church she goes to. That hasn't been made an issue yet. And as I say, the issues before her right now are very straightforward and very minimal. It will only become complicated when the Episcopal Church tries to drag in all this other stuff. So at this point, she has a very clear-cut thing. These people registered the trademarks several years ago. They've been using them for hundreds of years. They've had the corporate seal for a long, long time. So there's just really no dispute or argument there for any controversy that would bother a judge having to resolve it. What will happen is, though, when the Episcopal Church tries to inject its canons and all that kind of thing, it's going to run, of course, in foul of the All Saints Wakama case. And that is going to cause them problems, and the judge is certainly going to be familiar with that case. So while it might cause another judge in another state to come up short and say, ooh, what's this about canons, and what's this about Constitution, and all this kind of thing, she's already going to have much of her work done for her by the South Carolina Supreme Court, and she doesn't have to venture out far down that road either.
No, that's
so
true.
I think they've got a real uphill battle if they want to push it, and maybe they won't. Maybe Bishop von Rosenberg has to be taken at his word and says he's there to reconcile, not to divide and further split apart. And of course there's that petition circulating too, trying to get the Episcopalians and the remnant together. But I just, it's too much water under the bridge, and there's too much enmity between Bishop Jefferts Schori and Bishop Lawrence. I mean, I'm sure he doesn't have the enmity, but she, as you could tell from that sermon she gave, has simply she sees red when she sees him or hears his name now. So until they get rid of, get a new presiding bishop, I don't see things changing in South Carolina, and more harmony or reconciliation, ability to work together. But maybe after General Convention 2015, who knows?
Boy, you're optimistic. All right. Thank you so much for your report this week, Alan.
The other point is, this is all in God's hands. We really can only sit by and watch it as it happens.
And that's a real truth to this is, the reality on the ground is God can use this for good.
Exactly.
Regardless of the outcome.
Exactly.
And he's there to transform lives. God does not sit up nights worrying about whether or not the church wins in court.
I know, and he's happy to see his faithful servants go out there and get the gospel news out.
That's right.
All right.
All right. Thank you, Alan.
Okay.
Let's move on to the next story. Boy Scouts are in the news. For the longest time, the Boy Scouts of America have been able to choose whom they allow in their leadership positions and who they allow to be members. They've been able to, without too much trouble, make it a boys-only organization. They certainly have den mothers and stuff, but the reality is only boys could become Boy Scouts. They also said that you pretty much had to be heterosexual and had some other talents that the United States Supreme Court said, yeah, if you have an organization that doesn't accept public funds, you're welcome to have the rules of membership. We do that for golf clubs. We do that for lots of different entities. You're no different than that. And we're coming down to the point where public opinion in our country has turned, and the influence of money has turned. The board of directors is a different layout than it was 10, 20 years ago. And there's some people on the board of directors who said we need to open up membership to a different confluence of sexual identity, George.
Yes, there are two directors of the Boy Scouts of America who are the CEOs of major Fortune 500 corporations. And those corporations give a lot of money to the Boy Scouts, and they are under pressure to force the Boy Scouts to allow gay Scoutmasters and gay Boy Scouts, to get rid of the religious element of scouting and allow it to be on a local level. In other words, they want the Boy Scouts to follow the Episcopal Church in allowing a local option. I don't think that's a very good idea.
Well,
at all.
The local option doesn't work for the Episcopal Church. That's why we have the Anglican Church of North America. If the local option worked, and Depot worked, and Panel Reference, if all the promises people make worked when they have to change the rules, that would be fine, but none of them ever do. And we find ourselves in lawsuits. The Supreme Court says you can choose who your members are if you're an entity that's not taking public funds. That's great. You should stick with that. George and I are not Boy Scouts. Well, I was in 4-H. George, what's your story?
I played football.
You played football. However, there is an Anglican Scout entity here in America under the Anglican Church of North America, run by Terry Dunn out in Colorado. And he sent us these nice bandanas, and my clip has a maple leaf, must be a Canadian clip. What do you got over there?
I've got the flag of St. George, an English flag or an Anglican flag.
That's great. So there is hope. And I'm going to put the website here for the Anglican Scouting. I want you to head on over there. Now, Terry Dunn is a great organizer, because I get emails from him all the time saying I need to mention them, and I never do. But because of his persistence and the free gifts, boy, are we're
And Scout Sunday.
And Scout Sunday, we're pushovers. Please head over to the website, see if there's a way that you can add Anglican Scouting to your community, your church, and we thank you for your time. George, we're going to go back to some international stories. Some people saw my Facebook post of the top 10 countries that watch Anglican Unscripted. Nigeria comes at, I don't know if it's 4 or 5, but they're one of the main watchers of Anglican Unscripted. So we're going to do a Nigeria story. A famous archbishop, I can't pronounce his last name.
Joseph Adedeloye.
That guy. Passed on. He was a predecessor of Peter Akinola and the current Archbishop of Nigeria, Archbishop Ako. Archbishop Ako went to the funeral and said, you know, Nigeria is in trouble. Nigeria is going to collapse unless the church fixes itself first and then has the ability to fix Nigeria. Now that's interesting, because normally Christians get up and point to other people and say you're broken. Here, Archbishop Oka took an opportunity to say, we are kind of broken and we can't have the influence in Nigeria to stop the collapse until we fix ourselves.
Yes, the Archbishop pointed up in particular the problem of the prosperity gospel preachers. This isn't really an Anglican issue, but there are Christian leaders in Nigeria who have their Lear jets and their fancy limousines who say, if you give me your money, Jesus is going to reward you tenfold for every dollar you give me, and that the purpose of the Christian life is to become rich. Now, of course, that's utter nonsense and it's utter heresy, but it's attractive to some people. And the Archbishop of Nigeria is saying, when Christian leaders do not behave in a Christian fashion, when the Christian Association of Nigeria is fighting amongst themselves because the Catholics want to quit because there's a Pentecostal president, how can Christians stand as a witness for the truth and help turn the country around if their own house is not in order?
Yeah, this is interesting, because I've been to Africa many times, I know you have, and I'll go into a community in, boy, you know, Dar es Salaam or Uganda, Mabara, Uganda, where you see a small, dainty Anglican church. The bishop and the clergy for this small diocese get around on bicycles. You look over here to the other church, a name it and claim it church. The priest is driving a Range Rover. The church is huge. It has a paved parking lot. They have a bus that goes up and picks up their congregants. And I talked to local Anglican clergy, and they said, we can't compete with that imagery. We have the gospel of salvation, the transformed king, but we can't we can't compete with the prosperity that's being offered over there, even though it's a false prosperity.
Well, I don't want to say it's a fad and that it'll fade away on its own, because I don't know that. But it is a problem. The Anglican Church is facing not only pressure from Islam in Sudan and Nigeria and Kenya, it's also facing a pressure from Pentecostal movements of young people saying the Anglican Church is a little dull. And Archbishop Oko, and I know Stanley Ntagali in Uganda, and Eliud Wabakula and Daniel Deng in the Sudan, they've all responded to these pressures by turning to the gospel, not turning to tricks, not turning to hype, but return to the Bible and just preach and focus on the message of Jesus Christ. And guess what, Kevin? It works.
It does. I mean, when we figure out, and sometimes it's really hard, that it's not the job of the clergy or the church to make Jesus more palatable. It's your job to proclaim the transformational Jesus Christ. And if it's your job to make excuses for Jesus, like happens here in the Episcopal Church and other churches here in America, that doesn't work well, and you find that your congregation starts to fade, and you can't make payments, and the budget's all screwed up, and the bishop wants more money, and chaos reigns. Chaos doesn't reign when Jesus is proclaimed. Back from a long break, because we could never get time to shoot on the same day at the same time, because he's over in Canterbury, the most important part of the Anglican Communion. Peter Old, how you doing, Peter?
Oh, I'm okay, thank you.
Good.
Yeah, I'm good.
Now, it's actually kind of late at night for you, and it's kind of dinner time for us, so we're going to snap this through real quick.
Cool.
Here in America, we've dealt with civil unions and gay marriage.
Yeah.
The United States has, at the federal level, called the Marriage Act. It's marriage is between a man and a woman. Over in your part of England, that has also been the standard for many, many centuries. However, it's up for vote. And it's not because the Conservative Party, which is in control of England right now, it's because of the leader of the Conservative Party is pushing this through.
Yeah.
Tell me about the process of how a bill is introduced and what it takes to get finally legalized as law in England.
So it's not that complicated. Bills going through Parliament either start in the House of Commons or the House of Lords, which I guess for you would be the equivalent of the House of Representatives or the Senate. Okay, so they start either there, and wherever they start, they get a first reading, which is basically literally the bill is read out or accepted as read, and everybody goes, yeah, okay. Then it comes back for a second reading, and the second reading decides how it's going to be examined, right? And the options are, it can have a bill committee, which is basically like a committee of 12, 14 MPs who explore the bill and decide whether they need amendments. And those members are appointed by the parties, right? Now, all three main party leaders want this bill to pass, so they will stuff that bill committee with people who want the bill to pass, right? So that wouldn't be a proper way. The other option at that stage, instead of having a bill committee, is what's called a committee of the House, which basically means that the committee stage happens on the floor of Parliament. So any MP can speak. They can speak for as long as they want, and anybody can comment and lodge amendments to the bill. Right? Now, on Tuesday, we get the second reading of the bill, and Parliament is going to vote on which of those two methods it will take. And that's the interesting, that will be the first sign of seeing how much parliamentary opposition there is. Because
basically, if they vote one way, it gets a very public reading.
Yes.
If it goes the other way, it's a private reading without a lot of influence. If it goes one way, it goes before Rowan Williams. No.
That's the next step.
That's the next
this
step.
is still
Okay.
in the House of Commons. If it goes one way, it gets a committee examining it, which is still held in public, but that committee will be stuffed full of people who the party leadership wants in there, and there'll be people who will be happy with the bill. If it goes the other way, any MP gets to debate it at this point, and they can take as long as they want over that. And they can not quite filibuster it, but they can really go to grips and and look at all the mess. How this is actually not about equal marriage, because the definitions of adultery are different. How in other cases, same-sex unions and other sex unions are treated differently in terms of parental assumptions, and so it's not equal marriage. And in fact, some leading gay commentators here have said, "Vote down the bill. It's not equal marriage." No. Okay, so. Hopefully, what will happen is that it will get sent to a committee of the House. The opposition might think, let's have some fun here, right? Let's embarrass David Cameron, right? Let's show that over half his parliamentary party opposed this by having that debate on the floor of the House. So I suspect that's what will actually happen, and it will go to a committee of the House. Once the House of Commons has explored it at committee stage, proposed amendments, and voted on them, once the bill has been amended at that point, it then goes off to the House of Lords, right? Where the House of Lords gets to debate it, propose amendments, and vote. Now, in the House of Lords are the current Church of England bishops, or at least a bunch of them who get to vote. They will, to a man, vote no. But you've also got ex-bishops and ex-archbishops. For example, Rowan Williams. Rowan Williams will get to vote, as a peer on this. It'll be very interesting to see how he does vote, considering what he's publicly said about it in the last few months.
Yeah, you can't get him to stick to his story.
Let's see. Let's see.
Yeah.
Let's see. We've got ex-bishops like Lord Harris of Penderloth,
Sure.
who's the former Bishop of Oxford, the guy who appointed Geoffrey John as the Bishop
Right.
of Reading.
He's a
We
yes
know
vote.
he's going to vote yes. He's a liberal. He's a heretic. Let's just say he's going to vote yes. He's not quite Spungite, but he's getting there. But how Rowan Williams will vote, that's very interesting. But there's politically here, it would be dynamite if over half the parliamentary party of the Conservative Party vote no.
Mm-hmm.
So vote to vote down the bill, right? That would mean that David Cameron cannot even convince half of his MPs to support this. I mean, for him politically, and there are already rumours that there are moves afoot to replace him.
Now, my question is, does it stop there? Will a failure at the House stop the bill?
No, because it goes to the committee stage.
Mm-hmm.
It passes through that eventually, goes off to the Lords. They amend it. They may very well amend it quite severely or even throw it out.
Mm-hmm.
And then it comes back to the House of Commons for its final third reading there. If the House of Lords amend it or even vote it down, the House of Commons can force it through. But parliamentary precedent says that they can only force it through if it was something that was in their manifesto, right?
Oh, well, there we go. It's not in the
Or
Conservative
it's the budget,
Yeah.
right? So the House of Lords cannot stop something that a government was voted in to do, yeah, and quite rightly so. And the other thing that they can't do is stop the budget in general, right?
Right.
So what might happen is that the House of Lords vote it down or amend it so much that it becomes meaningless. And the government then has to say, do we drop it at this point, or do we begin to play parliamentary games that are not particularly, popular? We'll just have to wait and see. It's very interesting times.
Now, I have it on good authority over the last 60 years, the Queen has managed to stop certain things she doesn't want to happen.
Yeah, I was having a very interesting conversation with a friend of mine. He's a leading political commentator here, writes a column for one of the main newspapers here and various other web pieces and so on. And he was pointing out to me that actually the Queen appears to intervene in the legislation in this land a bit more than people think, and has a power of veto.
Right.
And she has actually done that to some ideas that have been put to her during her 60-year reign. Now, she obviously hasn't said anything public about this bill, though if you go back and listen to her Christmas speech,
Right.
there's some subtle undertones there which are quite interesting. She's certainly a strong Christian, and she probably personally be opposed to this. It'd be very interesting to see what she actually does.
Yeah, and if she does something, how would we know?
Yeah, well, exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
If this just disappears in the night,
Yeah.
we'll never know, because this was sponsored not by the Tories but by the leader of the Tories.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah,
you would just
exactly.
say, "Oh, it's all over now," and well, maybe the Queen had influence. Well,
The
Peter,
constitutional arrangements here are very interesting. Most people assume that the Queen doesn't have a final say. Yeah, that she's
she
kind of
does.
handed it over.
Yeah.
The whole Queen Anne Scottish Militia Bill. But it's been pointed out to me. I kind of had a look at this, that actually that's not quite true, and the Queen does actually, have a bit to say, and can go, I don't like that. It's not happening, as she should, because she is God's appointed monarch, and you were so wrong to get rid of her or her
What?
predecessors.
we didn't get rid of her. We just made other arrangements. So,
Got rid of her.
Peter, thank you for your report this week. We're going to be following up with lots of Justin Welby stories coming up in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And lots of...
Can I mention to your
Sure.
viewers,
Huh?
Justin Welby, there is an awesome picture of him going around on the internet at the moment. Last week, he just before he moved down to London, he went one evening to the Vineyard Church
Yep.
in Nottingham. Now, Vineyard, obviously, you've got over there is a big non-denominational evangelical charismatic, and he basically spent a whole hour being interviewed, talking about his faith journey, talking about his journey through the Anglican Church, his of becoming Archbishop of Canterbury, and then finally he gets prayed for, and it's all just kind of this amazing photo of being prayed for by these non-conformists and so on, and you get a real sense of here's finally a Bible-based man, a godly man, a prayerful man who can unite Christians in the country, not just Anglicans. And wow, this could be a great moment.
Yeah, it really could, because there's two thoughts. Either he was the one candidate who won't offend anybody, or he's the one candidate who will unite everybody. And we really won't know for the first couple of years.
I think he's going to offend a few people. People are already talking about how he'll probably go into Church House and begin to shift things around and change how the church civil service structure works, and quite rightly too, actually.
I'm sorry to hear that, really, All right, Peter, I gotta let you go. Get some sleep. My wife is calling. It seems it's supper time. I need to head back to the ranch. Adios.
All right. God bless, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks. George, let's move on from the happy story of story one and on to some sadder news. If you go back in Anglican Unscripted's heritage, our start, we started basically at the same time the Arab Spring started. I think the first revolution was in Tunisia. It moved about the Middle East, and Egypt, one of the stronger countries, fell as well. And we have a friend there, Bishop Munir Anis, who runs the Anglican province of the Middle East in Jerusalem. I did an interview with him at Mere Anglicanism in 2011, and there was no hint of a revolution anywhere in the Middle East. It was basically an interview about what's been happening with him. If I did an interview today with Bishop Munir Anis, there would be a completely different story, because so much has been revealed about the power of tyrants and the inability of Middle Easterners to understand what freedom means. Since the revolution, many countries have fallen, the leaderships and the tyrants have fallen, and this has been danger for Christians. For the longest time, a tyrant wouldn't want anybody in his kingdom fighting. So even if he agreed with the Muslims or he agreed with the Christians, you weren't allowed to fight anybody, or you'd have to answer to him. And answering to him was far worse than the fighting would have been. So there was peace. There's no longer any peace because we moved into this artificial democracy, especially in Egypt, where they elected a Muslim Brotherhood leader who gets up and, once he's in office, says the Constitution no longer applies to me. There was not a big revolt. There was some people who said, no, you can't do that. But the large majority said, yeah, I mean, it never applied to the other dictators and leaders of the country since the Ottoman Empire. Why would it apply to you? And that's their understanding of freedom. It's a curtailed, non-specific freedom where maybe they can make more money at the local grocery store, but now we have fighting in the streets. Muslims are killing Christians. Christians sometimes fight back, sometimes they don't, but it's a whole different world than it was 2 years ago, George.
Yeah, and in Egypt we have Muslim extremists fighting moderate Muslims, and we're seeing the country slide into anarchy, where the 60% who voted for the Muslim Brotherhood are ranged against the 40% who voted no. And only 10% of the population of Egypt is Christian. There are a lot of Muslims who are against the Muslim Brotherhood. And the situation's gotten so bad that the Chief of the Army General Staff last week said, look, the Army cannot hold this country together. We're on the verge of breaking apart into an Afghanistan or a Somalia or a Syria. It is that bad in Egypt. In fact, one of the big tourist hotels in Cairo, the Intercontinental, the New York Times reported street fighting broke into the ground floor of the Intercontinental Hotel. Now, if you're a tourist from Dubuque, Iowa, about to go on your Nile cruise, and there are people fighting with with Molotov cocktails on the ground floor of the hotel you're staying at, I don't think you're going to tell your friends to come back to Egypt. The tourist trade is just shut down. It's just really bad in Egypt. And in fact, on Thursday, they had a grand meeting called by the head of the Al-Azhar, the big Muslim university there, of all the political leaders from left and right, and all the religious leaders to come together to stop the violence, to stop the persecution of Christians, to sit down and talk these things through. And I pray that that happens. But frankly, it's a big prayer.
It is. One of the difficulties is Christianity is alive in the Middle East. Churches are growing, underground communities of Christians are meeting, home churches are growing. There is a underground of believers. There's the Coptic Christians. There's an Anglican province that oversees all this. I mean, there is an ability for Christians to be there, but the whole political landscape for them has changed. It is.
Yeah, well, let's just take one country, Algeria, for instance. There's an Anglican church in Algiers that used to serve the expatriate, the English and European community, and now it serves mostly a native or Sudanese refugee community. Now, the Protestant churches in Algeria in the mid-1960s, after the French left, maybe there were 1,000, 2,000 Christian Algerian natives. Now the estimates are there are about 150, 200,000 Christians. It's all internal house church evangelism of Algerian to Algerian, and God is moving through the Middle East. We don't hear about that, but you know, that's all part of this great underlying turmoil. The economy's falling apart. Islam is being challenged from below, not from Americans pushing their faith overseas, but from people questioning it in their own countries. And this is, of course, where Satan loves to come in and stir up dissent and trouble.
Now, the Anglican Unscripted audience is vast. This isn't a time where George and I are pumping up our numbers. That's not what this is about. This is about a call to prayer. We have a large international audience. You know a reason for prayer. You know that we pray for our brothers and sisters in Christ. And at this point, we need to be in prayer for our brothers and sisters in the Middle East. It's not just a war of Islam and Christian. It's a war for the hearts and souls of the next generation of Christians. And they can be genocide just like that. We've seen this time and time again. People are quick to turn their eyes away from something they don't want to see. And I don't want to see this. It's a time to prayer. I ask our viewers to do so. Okay, George, let's close out the show, and I think it's important for Anglicans to understand perspective, or at least you guys in the South. I flew down from nice cold Connecticut, 7 degrees outside, to balmy 72 Charleston. I got off the plane with my black polo shirt.
72, Kevin, that's cold.
I got off the plane with my black polo shirt, my white arms from Connecticut here, and everybody in the terminal had parkas, had these little mitts over their ears, had thick gloves, and it was 72 and balmy. And I'm like, George, you Southerners need a little bit more perspective.
Kevin, this is the time of year I wear my wool cassock. It's cold outside.
It's cold outside. It's ridiculous to see the differences between what you guys think is cold and what we think is cold. And it's important that we have a perspective with our church. And that's what Anglican TV is here to provide, and Anglican Unscripted. Hopefully you guys get a chance to watch the mere Anglican videos. I also posted some reflections with 3 bishops that are interesting. On the left-hand side of Anglican TV, there's a menu of all the stuff we recorded. It's a brand new website. I haven't pulled the 500 videos that were on the old website completely over yet, but the stuff I recorded over the last 2 years are there. Sadly, we have 5 years of videos. I will get to those soon. George, pledging has been going good. Last week we asked people to pray for our health. How's that going?
Well, I've had 2 MRIs, an EKG, an echocardiogram, a nuclear stress test, a colonoscopy, blood work, and I had something else that was also unpleasant. I've been kept busy.
That's good. Well, as soon as you know any news, let us know so we can continue to pray for you. And same here, George and I are trying to be healthy in 2013. He's doing the whole checkup routine. I'm doing the Weight Watcher point routine. And with any luck and God's heavenly grace, we'll still be with you at this time next year. Sorry for the news presenting Bishop Catherine Jefferts Shorey, but George and I tend to stay around a little bit more. As far as helping us stay around, please continue to pledge. I've got about 12 or 13 people who pledged for the year, which is great. We want to add to those numbers. There's a lot of travel involved this year. George and I will be going to the new Wineskin Conference. We'll be going over to the GAFCON Conference the week of October 20th in Kenya. So we need some moolah, fundage, American greenback to get there, and you're the people who can help, because we found out that Anglican clergy and dioceses and provinces don't have a lot of money to help Anglican Unscripted Church.
No, they don't.
I'm Kevin
And
Paulson.
I'm George Conger, and you've been watching episode 64 of Anglican Unscripted.
Okay. Yep. You gotta lay off that carbonated stuff. Yeah. Of course, we're lucky that we're shooting today, and not right after we're having a Super Bowl party tomorrow at the Colson Chaos Manor, and having chili and all the good fixins, and we'll even watch the game too. Inviting lots of friends over. And okay.
An adult for the kids, or the adults?
Oh, it's just for the adults. The kids can go play Nintendo in the other room. Although my kids like football, so they'll probably watch and get to, they'll eat 2 or 3 servings of dessert and say, "Oh yeah, we ate everything. We're fine, Dad." So, such is life with children. Okay. Here we go with the intro. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to another edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 46, Super Bowl Sunday, Scouting Sunday. Now, George, I just got back from Charleston, and I've talked to many people who watch our show, and I've learned there's a couple different varieties of Anglican Unscripted viewers. There's actually people who get paid to watch the show because they're legal lawyers or whatever, or they get to watch at work where they're clergy. That's an interesting proposition. I would love to get paid to watch or even produce the show. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm George Conger. And today's February 3rd, 2013.
Okay, one more time. That sounded a little convoluted. 3, 2, 1. Three, two, one. Welcome to another edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 46, Super Bowl Sunday.
64.
64. What?
You said episode 46.
I think you're being much too picky.
Oh my.
We haven't even done our first story yet. Lord have mercy. Okay. 3, 2, 1.